Hey guys, going good? You're learning new stuff?
Yes.
You ready to learn more?
Yes.
And put your hands together for Jamie. He's done an amazing job. Okay, I'm going to show you tonight how to build and structure a multi-million-dollar property portfolio from scratch. And I'm going to get in some detail tonight about different suburbs in Melbourne. So I'm actually going to go through and talk about areas that you should avoid in Melbourne and areas that you should be targeting and what's happening in the market in the last 5 years, 10 years, and what's happening in the next 5 years. Who'd like to learn that? Bit of a disclaimer, before we do anything, basically all I'm doing is educating you. Before you take any action, you've got to speak to a qualified mortgage broker or real estate agent and or an accountant just to make sure you get your asset protection done correctly and your structure set up correctly as well. So there's 4 distinctions that I'm going to cover tonight. I want to talk about where we are in the property cycle. Now, how many people know exactly where we are in the property cycle right now? Some of you do, some of you don't. How many people have never heard of such a thing as a property cycle or the property clock? Well, I'm going to explain that to you and go through the history of the Australian property market for the last probably 100 years. Also, I'm going to talk about how to structure your investment property portfolio correctly from scratch to make sure you get everything done correctly. So as you're accumulating properties, you don't want to have exposure. So if someone sues you, for example, one of your tenants, you don't want to be losing all your properties and having a domino effect as well. Also, I'm going to show you how to retire on an income of about $60,000 per year, just owning 3 or 4 properties. Who's interested in that? And also I'm going to show you a 10-step system, a very simple system that's used by our members to accumulate properties. Now we've had members now for the last 5 years that have purchased 6, 7 properties over the last 5 years. So they're pretty much buying 1 per year. Some of them are buying up to 2 per year depending on their situation and obviously how eager and keen they are to buy property. In terms of the property market in Australia, the residential property market in Australia is worth $5 trillion currently. The Australian Stock Exchange is worth $1.5 trillion. So the residential property market underpins the entire economy, our banking system. It is bigger than anything else in Australia. And that's why I choose to play in the biggest sand pit in Australia. So if you look at comparative to the Australian Stock Exchange, there's really no comparison between how much money the Australian residential property market represents. And most of our wealth, up to 70% of wealth in Australia, is held in property, in residential property. All the wealthiest nations in the world hold majority of the wealth in residential property. That's why it's such a stable, I wouldn't call it the investment market, but it's such a stable place to invest. I'll give you a bit of background about myself. I'm actually a real estate agent and a mortgage broker, but none of these certificates and degrees that I've actually gained over the years have helped me to make any money. The reality is these teachers that I've had teach me this stuff at Monash University are on 80 grand a year. If they knew what to do, if they knew how to make money, they wouldn't be lecturing at Monash University. Would you agree? There's no such thing as a retired multi-million-dollar professor. They don't exist. You know, to become a mortgage broker, it's a 3-week course. You know, the guy that's teaching is probably on 60 grand. So the reason I'm going to show you this is because I'm qualified to talk about all the stuff that I'm talking about, but really what I'm talking about tonight is purely as an investor. And I'm actually going to show you exactly what properties I've purchased over the last 2 years. I'm not going to show you properties that I've purchased 10 years ago where I was buying apartments for, $97,000 in St Kilda, because those stories are fine for other events. I'm going to show you stuff that I'm doing right now. Who's interested in that? Because the number one key distinction is everyone's got an opinion about what's going to happen, but the only people that I really listen to are investors that are making money right now in the market and they can prove it to you. Isn't that the people you want to deal with? Because everyone's got an opinion, right? But most opinions are not backed up by anything apart from letters behind your name, which are worth nothing. The most important thing is not the letters after your name, it's the money in the zeros in your bank account. Would you agree? So career progression, I've got a very conservative career, funds management, Australian uni. I worked for NAB. I talked about this yesterday. I'm not going to go through and bore the crap out of you guys tonight about what I've done in the past. But let's just say it's a very conservative, boring career that I've had that kind of really, I couldn't wait to get out of there, you know. It's one of these things where I remember I was working for NAB, I just couldn't wait to pull the pin on my job. I absolutely hated where I worked. I was working 80 hours a week, the politics was incredible. Who can relate to that? So I actually, when I was, I'm 37 now, but when I was in my 30s, I actually stopped working and retired and lived off my property portfolio, which is important for you to know because the stuff that I'm teaching you right now, I'm teaching as an investor in the Melbourne property market, but also what I do with my time is I drive around Melbourne as a real estate agent, and all my time is spent talking to developers, negotiating deals, buying property. So the knowledge that I have is extremely detailed from the industry perspective, but also it's practical because I'm buying all this stuff myself. I'm going to show you what I'm buying and why I'm buying it. So I run 21st Century Property Direct, which I started 5 years ago. So I've been running and basically teaching people how to build wealth through property over the last 5 years by doing workshops and events and educating people all around Australia, including New Zealand and Fiji. I've sourced over $1.1 billion worth of property for private individuals, which is a lot. This year, I think it's going to go up to about 1.4 billion, which is an incredible amount of real estate when you think about it. 95% of properties that I source, or 95% of properties in the market get rejected. And I've developed a very stringent criteria that I use, which has 52 points that eliminates 95% of all properties. And eliminates virtually 90% of all suburbs as well. So I only source in a very specific area of Melbourne. I'm going to show you which area that is and the type of properties that I focus on. And this will save you about 10 years of research and due diligence. So I'm like the John West of the property world, you know. I throw back a lot of tuna. There's nothing wrong with some of the stuff I throw back. I'm sure someone will have a good meal out of it, but I choose the best because I've got access to virtually so much stock. You know, it's like I've got no affiliation with any particular developers. I can pretty much source and recommend anything I like, and I can buy anywhere I like. And I teach people basically and you know, the key distinction between wealthy property investors and people that don't invest in property is just the level of awareness. Would you agree? If you don't have awareness right now about the Melbourne property market, then you are paralysed with uncertainty. Because if you don't know how to make a decision based on fundamentals, if you don't know how to do feasibility software, if you don't know how to use feasibility software, how to do basic cash flow analysis, how to read RP data and stats, how to analyse different properties, then why would you invest? Would you agree? I mean, no one wants to sabotage themselves and just lose money. So the key to investing, before you spend any money on property, you have to invest in yourself. You've got to invest in your knowledge in yourself. And also you've got to build a team of experts around you. That's one of the key things, which is what we do for our members. So how many real property investors are there, first of all, in Australia? Let's look at the whole thing, because there isn't actually a lot of property investors in Australia. This is from the ATO. And in Australia currently, 1.7 million homes are owned by private landlords. And you can see there, 72.8% of property investors in Australia have exactly one property. So I don't really call that person an investor. It's just a person that has purchased a property in a suburb. If they live in a good suburb, they've bought in a good suburb. If it's bad, it's bad. 18% have two properties, exactly. Still not an investor. 5.5 have three. And right down to 6 or more is only 0.9% of properties of the 20% have more than 6 properties. That's really a property investor. A property investor is someone that has 5 or 6 or more properties. Because to get to 6, you can't really do it by accident. You can't just wake up one day and go, shit, I've bought 6 properties. You know, how do I do that? You've got to have systems behind you. You've got to have some basic level of knowledge and banking and understanding to buy 6 properties, because you're going to max out by your 3rd or 4th property very quickly and the banks won't give you any more money. If you look at the Australian property market, and I'll give you some key distinctions to write down during this presentation, 72% of properties in Australia are owner-occupied. The Australian residential property market is not an investment market. It is not an investment market. It is a market that is not dominated by investors. It is a market that what I call is a necessities market. It is driven by people who live in properties. So if anyone tries to analyse the Australian property market based on investment fundamentals, technical analysis, they are wrong from the very word go, because they're assuming it's a market driven by fear and greed and speculation, which it's not. It is not an investment market. That's why most of these academics get it wrong. And I've been speaking at seminars now for 5 years, and I've shared the stage with some people that are predicting that during the GFC, the property market was going to crash. Where in fact, during the GFC, I bought more property than any other time in my life because I was getting bargains. The best time to buy property is not today. The best time to buy property was during the GFC. If you haven't bought property during the GFC in Melbourne, I'm talking about a normal boring townhouse or apartment, you've already missed out on $100,000 or $150,000. That's the reality. Today is just an okay time to buy property. Next year, it'll be too late to buy property because it's going up right now as we speak, and I'll show you the media articles. So where are we in the Australian property market? Like, what's going on? Well, all the ducks have truly lined up in the Australian property market. If you look at the timing of the market, currently Melbourne in the last 12 months, you can see they went up 7.8 or 9%. So in the last 12 months, the median price has gone up. Sydney's taking off. You know, people say Sydney's booming. Sydney hasn't done anything for 5 years. Sydney's catching up because from 2003 to 2008, Sydney just went sideways. So Sydney's just catching up to where it left off in 2003 and 4. So Melbourne is there, 7.8%. You can see that was the last property boom in Melbourne, or in Australia I should say, in 2003. And currently where we are now, the volume of properties on the market is a fraction of what we had in 2003. We're still not at the boom period right now. And this year, reality is we just ran out of time because December, all the agents go for holidays. My holiday starts tomorrow and I'm back on the 6th of January. We don't want to know about property in December because, you know, it's Christmas, right? So we need a month off. But you can see where we are right now. We are literally going back to where we were in 2003, which was the boom period of the property market, and we're just there currently in October. The stats are usually about 2 months old. The volume is still not there. People are still not listing properties in blue chip suburbs in Melbourne. If you look at realestate.com and you type in Windsor, Ormond, McKinnon, Kew, Canterbury, Camberwell, you have 15, 20 houses on the market. There should be 80. The wealthy are still not selling their properties. The movement's still not there, despite what the media writes, because the media has no idea what they're writing most of the time. They just look at median prices. So where we are in the property clock is a measure of the property market based on historical evidence and median price movements over the last 100 years. I'm going to show you what it's based on. And usually it takes about 8 to 10 years around the property clock. And the property clock, if I can get the slide to move, usually looks like a clock. Imagine a clock. Okay, and to get 12 o'clock, you get the peak of the market. I might just draw these. Well, there we go. Next time that happens, I'm just going to start telling jokes. Is that all right? Okay, so we've got the timing of the market, we've got the peak of the market, and then we've got the downturn of the market. We've got downturn, stabilisation, upturn, and boom. When it booms, it's a frenzy. And the reality is when it booms, you're either in the market or you're trying to get in and overpaying. The idea is to have property when the whole thing just goes up, because there's no point getting in at the very peak of the market. Otherwise, you're going to be sitting on your property for a couple of years with no growth. So where we are in terms of Sydney and Melbourne is right here. Melbourne is around 6:30 on the property clock right now, going into 7 o'clock. So the next year or two, no one knows exactly, is going to be really the difference between you buying a lot of property or waiting for the whole thing to happen over again as it did in 2003. The key thing is, it's going to happen with or without you. You know, it's a harsh thing to say, but that's the reality. The market's already got the money in there. There's already foreign investors going in hard. People are already upgrading their houses. So it's going to happen with or without you. The question is, do you want to be part of it? That's the key thing. That's why I always tell people, get the education to make sure when it happens, you know exactly what to do. If you look at the combined rentals and combined capital cities, rents are going up across the major capital cities. But really, the market in Melbourne especially hasn't done anything for the last 2 or 3 years. It's just gone sideways. It's only in the last 6 months the market has picked up. But unfortunately, we just ran out of time this year because the last major weekend for auctions is actually this weekend, and that's it. It's all over till mid-January. In terms of Melbourne, you can see there, Melbourne's actually going sideways a little bit. Some suburbs have done well, but really it's been very quiet. It's been very quiet for 2 years, which is really good because that's the period where you can really negotiate and get discounts on properties and negotiate terms of settlement. When the market's at the peak, you have no leverage with vendors. Vendors are unrealistic and you're paying top dollar because no one will negotiate with you because 80%, 90% are getting sold. When the market's depressed, that's when you actually buy properties and make really good money on going in at the bottom. Think about it from this perspective. When do people buy a lot of white goods and stuff? There's one day per year when they go nuts, yeah? Boxing Day, sales, right? You remember those people, they like sleep there for 2 days in front of Myers, you know, to get that fridge that's like $50, you know? Why don't we do the same thing for property? Isn't it crazy? We wait till it booms and then get in at the very peak, you know? This is an article from this morning about Melbourne property market, and you can see there from realestate.com, stats reveal that 56% of Melbourne buyers in September, October made offers above asking price. 61% bid above reserve prices at auctions. Auction clearance rates in Melbourne is about 80% at the moment, so the market is truly moving. If you look at the history of the Australian property market, this is history. Now, I'm going to ask you a very technical question. This is the market since 1890. How many people, and this is only for the stockbrokers in the room, would agree this is an upward trending line? So the strategy that we teach is buy and hold and never sell. You know, and that's what we teach in one of the best markets in the world. Do you remember during the GFC what people were predicting? The bubble's gonna burst. You know, and I was hanging out in Brighton on the Golden Mile waiting for these rich bastards to just run out of their houses so I can snap up those $14 million mansions for what, 500,000? But it just never happened, you know, it's just one of these things. The end never came. And in fact, during the GFC, when I was telling people to buy property and negotiate hard, and I'll give you 2 tips as an agent working in the industry, and I train agents. The best time to make an offer on property is after the auction, when you just got passed in. The second best time is Monday morning, when they're in the office, depressed, they've got the car payments due in at the end of the month, right? And now they're working for you, not the vendor, trying to get the deal across. During the GFC, what happened in Melbourne with houses and apartments? Nothing. It was supposed to crash, wasn't it? I mean, I was speaking on stages with so-called experts from the US predicting the Melbourne market's going to crash. And I said to him, you know, the fundamental mistake you're making is you're assuming we're dealing with an investment market. Our market is dominated by owner-occupiers. 72% of owner-occupiers dominate the Australian market. Do you know what this person said to me? And I've got it in video. I know you're special. But every market has a bubble. So I keep contacting him once a year. Hey buddy, hey, how you going? Yeah, I know. Is it still crashing because it's been, what is it now, 5 years now? And I just really want these apartments to go, you know, pick them up for nothing. So really during the GFC, nothing happened. In fact, the Melbourne property house median price peaked at 601,000. And in fact, the median price last week was 595,000. So it's done nothing, it's just gone sideways, which is great news for you. This is the Sydney property market from 1901 to 2006. You know, the amount of times that people have predicted the market's going to crash and it's unsustainable, I mean, it's been in the thousands. I mean, I run events where I spend an hour talking about all the headlines that predict the property market crashes, and yet it's still going up. Median price in Melbourne in 1966 was $13,000 for an average house. I know the young kids in the audience go, man, I'll just go out and buy all of South Yarra and I'll sell my car. You know, 60-year-old, I was born at 37,000. It tripled in 10 years. You've got to understand that property in Melbourne, as a percentage of household income, has always been extremely expensive. It's never been affordable, because if you look at 13 grand in 1966, you're probably making $500, you know, to $1,000 per year. So it's always been an income ratio of about 6 or 7 or 8, multiplied by the average income per year. We've got the lowest interest rates in recorded history right now in Australia. Recorded history. We've never had a bank swap rate of 2.5%. The coolest thing about this is there's 18 suburbs in Melbourne that are cash flow positive, and Carlton's one of them. So you're talking about a $500,000 property. Your cost of funding is 5%. What's 5% of 500,000? Anyone? 25K? The rental on this $500,000 property in Melbourne is about 4%, 4.5. What's 4% on 500,000? 20,000. So what's the gap? $5,000 per year. How many weeks in a year in Victoria? 52. So how much is that a week? About $100? The ATO gives you another 50 back. Who can afford $50 a week? If you can afford $50 a week, you could be owning an apartment or a townhouse right now in Melbourne. It's that simple. You don't have to, I do cash flow analysis for a couple of hours when I talk about how to do cash flow analysis on properties, but it's really that simple. The rentals now are virtually the same level as the interest rates are, which is incredible. It's an unprecedented time that we're experiencing right now in terms of the property market. So we can see that we're at the lowest point. I think the RBA will do another cut, and then that's it. It's going to go sideways for a long time, just because of the interest rates in Japan and Europe are virtually around the zero mark. Irrespective of that, credit policies are going up. It's getting harder to borrow money. Remember, the banks always want to keep certain people out of the market. So when interest rates go down, your serviceability gets better, but then they increase your credit scoring, which is the way they assess how much money you can borrow. We've got massive rising population in Melbourne. At the moment, our populations are just over $4 million. In 2060, it's going to be over 8 million. Where are we going to put them? Because they all want to live in St Kilda. So where are we going to put 4 million people, guys, in Melbourne? It is incredible. I mean, these people are not moving in with coming to Australia broke. A lot of these people are coming in with $500,000 to $1 million. They're going straight into existing suburbs. We've got rising cost of construction far above inflation. Cost of building is going up constantly, way above inflation. You've got massive cost of constructing new properties. Melbourne has a lot of suburbs like South Melbourne, St Kilda, Port Melbourne, Albert Park that have high restrictions, heritage overlays, density restrictions, single dwelling restrictions per block. You can't create more stock. If you want to lose money in Melbourne, invest in Docklands and South Bank. But if you want to have real good capital growth, there are areas where there's virtually no stock being created, which means what happens when there's no stock being created and a lot of people want to move in the area? Prices go up. Scarcity effect. The other interesting thing is, for the first time, Melbourne boundaries, urban boundaries, have been locked permanently by the government. So if you look at Melbourne historically, and Melbourne is the most livable city in the world, third year in a row. I mean, it's amazing to live anywhere in Melbourne. Melbourne has been kind of expanding indefinitely, and these farmlands on the fringes of Melbourne have been purchased by 4 major land banking developers, Peat Limited being the biggest land banker in Victoria, waiting for the fringes of Melbourne to catch up. But what that creates is slums, because the government knew that if you go to Los Angeles, you have suburbs that are demographically disadvantaged compared to other suburbs. So the government did a study based on Melbourne future growth, because it's expanding. By the way, we had 97,000 people immigrate to Melbourne last year. Number one city, 97,000. Incredible, nearly 2,000 people. It's like 1,800 a week. So they went to London and they studied London, which is land, the urban boundaries are locked permanently, which means if you're driving out of London 45 minutes, suddenly you're in beautiful regional country with, chickens and cows and it's all green. If you're in Los Angeles, you drive for an hour out of the city, you're in like slums. So they said, well, that's it. We're going to do the London deal. This is the Melbourne urban boundaries locked permanently. There will be no rezoning of rural land beyond these boundaries. We've got about 20 years left of stock in the 3 main growth corridors, which are the dark grey areas, and the rest of Melbourne is locked. What happens when you restrict land supply in a growth area? Land goes up, which is exactly what's been happening in Melbourne. In fact, in Melbourne, in 2001, the average block of land was $71,000. In 2011, the average block is $210,000. Currently, it's around $250,000. This is brand new estates. It's going to go up to $400,000 eventually. And this is on the fringes of Melbourne, guys. Think about what will happen in blue chip areas like Kew, in Camberwell and Brunswick and Yarraville and Williamstown. What will happen to land in those areas? Also, because we've got all this migration coming in, we've got a shortage of dwellings, around 500,000 by 2020, which is incredible. This is from the Building Industry Association of Australia. Who thinks that's a pretty cool market to invest in so far? Yeah, can you see how the ducks are lining up? I can just go on and on. But you can still lose money in Melbourne by buying really bad properties in bad areas. Not every property is made equal, and not every land will go up at the same rate. So where are the best areas to invest in Melbourne? Now, I actually spend virtually half a day, sometimes up to a day, talking about due diligence and methodology of how we choose projects. I'm going to give you one little snippet of one tiny little piece of the equation. Walk score. Walk score is a ranking, an international standardised ranking of the ability of a person in a suburb to walk to coffee, shops, transport, infrastructure, schools. Who thinks that's pretty cool? That's a good way to measure something. If you can walk everywhere, it's called the livability factor. The suburb has a high ranking of walk score. If you can't walk anywhere for miles and miles and miles, chances are it's got a low livability factor, and then it's got a lower price because people want to live in just on the fringes of major capital cities, trendy areas. We can have a cappuccino and go back to the city and go to the beach and all that kind of stuff. So let's look at Melbourne. So if I was Predator, looking at, the coolest suburbs in Melbourne to live, I can get a coffee. The green spots are the best spots. The red spots are not so good. So is there a correlation between capital growth and walk score? There is, and the correlation is extremely strong. And I'll show you the exact suburbs. The number one walk score in the top area in Melbourne is South Yarra. The last suburb is Hallam, based on the walk score. So if you look at the top suburbs in Melbourne, for example, Carlton is number one at the moment. This changes week by week, depending on what's happening. 97, Fitzroy 96, Fitzroy North 93, Melbourne, St Kilda 93, South Yarra 92. And then you've got Croydon North 38, Lilydale 38, Endeavour Hills 37. By the way, this is purely for investing, nothing to do with lifestyle. Okay, so I'm not talking about suburbs to live in, I'm talking about purely where you put your money if you want your money to grow fast. Interestingly enough, look at the capital growth. Toorak, walk score, 74. Median price, 2.26. Frankston North, walk score, 38. Price, 247. The correlation is virtually 1-to-1. The higher the walk score, the higher demand for the area. There's a scarcity factor. In South Yarra, within 5 minutes walking distance, you can walk to over 100 restaurants and coffee shops. It's incredible, isn't it? So obviously people want to pay a premium to be in an area that's more convenient for lifestyle, for schools, transport, infrastructure, coffee. Where do you think I source my properties? There's other fundamentals obviously, but I'm just giving you a snippet of one strategy. Have a look at the capital growth, because I deal with facts only. The cool thing about real estate, guys, is being a real estate agent, I've got access to RP data and all the other databases that we use as agents, and I deal with facts, I don't deal with opinions. So for example, Q, since 2001 to 2011, has gone up 366% in terms of median price. In 2001, you could have picked up a house in Kew for $417,500. Now, 1.94, and now it's actually 2.25. So if you go down, the fastest growing areas have also the fastest, the highest walk score. This is from the Values General's office, and you can see there. Well, let me ask you a question. Who thinks that I invest only in the red zone? Yeah. If you invest in the red zone, you're going to do well. I don't care what happens in the orange zone or the yellow one. God bless them. And you can live there, but don't invest there. You've got to separate emotion. You've got to take emotion out of the equation. Would you agree? If you let emotion creep into your equation, it's like saying, I don't want to buy shares in Woolworths. Well, I'm not recommending shares here because I shop at Coles. I mean, it's crazy, isn't it? So live wherever you want to live, but invest in areas where you're stacking the odds in your favour. If you look at a comparative of properties, 91, if you bought a house for $300,000 and it was located in Melbourne, distance from the city of 45 kilometres, today it's worth about $400,000. It would have gone up by $100,000, $150,000. Yet houses, 10 k's from the city, today the median price is $1.4 million. So obviously the closer the houses and the land is located to the city, the faster they go up. So let's talk about 21st century property directing and who we are. Number one, we're an unbiased educator. So by becoming a member, and there's a lot of free events that we do, but obviously we don't tell anyone, we just tell our members, but they bring friends quite often and colleagues. You get educated unbiasedly on the property market in Australia, in Melbourne. And you get educated by experts like myself, who's a real estate agent in the market, sourcing property virtually every day. We've got a unique sourcing service as well, because a lot of people get educated but they don't quite know how to get started. So we help them out with properties, and I'll show you some of the properties that we source. We've also got one-on-one coaching. Who thinks that's important, to get a coach that keeps you accountable and kicks your ass when you're getting lazy? And we also have a lot of unique events that we run as well. So we do professional coaching, webinars, and things like that. If they can, getting stuck here. Uncomfortable silences. Okay, why are we unique? We're very unique because of the due diligence and research that we do. I virtually eliminate most of the properties on the market. I've developed a 52-point due diligence criteria, and I'll show you a few of the points that I use to eliminate a lot of the properties. So for example, I want 10% capital growth historically in the suburb based on RP data. The difference between speculating and investing is I only invest in proven areas. I don't care what will happen in the future. You know, in Adelaide, they're supposed to have the Olympic Dam mine. Didn't happen. People put money in, they lost money. If the area's gone up by 10%, that's one of the number one criteria. Rental yield has to be around 4% plus, because I don't want to be paying a lot of money per week to buy that property. That's a very important consideration. Vacancy rates of around 1% on the type of property that you're buying. So you want to have a lot of people looking after your property, so you're not going to have problems with tenants. You want to have a premium location. Please write this down. Melbourne is valued by two things: proximity to the city and proximity to water. If you get both, like South Melbourne, 2 k's from the water, 2 k's from the city, you're going to do well. But in South Melbourne, you can still buy serviced apartments and go backwards for the next 10, 15 years. So you've got to choose the right property as well. High population growth. You want to make sure that population is moving to the area, not fleeing the area. People are running for the hills and stay away. So what we do is we have access to financial planners, mortgage brokers, property accountants, property solicitors, quantity surveyors, property managers, insurance specialists. We build a whole team around our clients. Make sure that we hold their hand, make sure they have a good experience with property. The emphasis here is education and knowledge. You know, a lot of people just use our services to get educated, get the team, get the experts, and go off and do their own thing, which is really cool. So we do unbiased education, strategic planning. We can get you financially pre-approved and structured, give you good accounting advice, property sourcing. And the cool thing about all this is that your coach coordinates all these people. Why? Because your coaches themselves are mega successful property investors. So how many people would be interested in getting mentored by successful property investors right now? Now, guys, can you just stand up and just wave of hands? Here they are there at the back of the room. So these guys are all investing right now, buying property, and that's a very important thing. If you're getting advice from someone, make sure they are qualified to give advice, and I don't mean by the degrees that they've done. The focus of our company is you. That's what we focus on, making sure that you're successful. Now, let me just show you, the reason I'm going to show you these properties that I've purchased is because I want you to understand that we're all buying properties right now in the market. And if I'm buying 3 properties per year, I can definitely teach people how to buy 1 property a year. Would you agree? Because that gives me the qualifications to teach people. Being an agent and a mortgage broker doesn't actually give me the right to teach people how to become successful property investors, because there's thousands of agents and thousands of mortgage brokers without property portfolios. So these are the properties that I've purchased. Example number one is number 1 of 1 Mackie Road in Bentley East, grey area, 555,000. It's an off the plan. It settles in July next year. The reason I bought that property is because the courtyard in that property was 160 square metres. So it's a massive courtyard, 2-bedroom apartment, walking distance to shops. Then I bought a property in Bond Beach, which is a really cool area in Melbourne that's undervalued, that's going up through a lot of rejuvenation. And this property settled at the beginning of this year. I had a tenant there literally before I settled the property. And once again, the reason I bought this townhouse was because the land component was 180 square metres. There's a theme that's evolving here. Then I bought a property in Martin Street, St Kilda for $625. St Kilda's a great area. I grew up in St Kilda, I went to school there. So I know the area really well. It was a pretty rough area when I grew up in St Kilda, 20 years ago, not the trendy cappuccino area right now. So that was $625, and that's the development there.
What was the suburb before St Kilda?
Bentley East. Then there's another one which is St Kilda as well, $645, which is an apartment in the same development, which is a 2-bedroom apartment as well. Glen Iris is the last property that I've purchased for $575, which is a brand new development, 3 years to complete, so 3 off the plan, 10% down, nothing to pay for 3 years. And it's this particular property there with a big courtyard. So once again, 2-bedroom, massive courtyard, $575,000. I also bought a property in my self-managed super fund, which is a commercial property in the building that I work in. That's how lazy I am. I just went downstairs and said, oh, is this for sale? Oh, this will do. I'm kidding. I did research, all right? It just happened to be in the building. And I happened to be on a lunch break. So that's the property there. That's our actual head office. So if you ever come to visit us in the office, that's where we are. That's what it looked like beforehand. Lovely colour, yellow and blue carpets. So if you're in a mental hospital, you really like those colours. Being an agent, I did a reno and I polished the floorboards and painted it white, which now looks normal. So this was a purchase for $250, and by the way, that currently is up for lease. So if anyone wants to lease that property from me, come and see me later on. So 6 investment properties over 2 years with $3.175 million. So if I can do 6, I can definitely teach people how to do 1. Would you agree? Now, because I was bored, because they're all buy and hold, I did a reno as well in Vermont, which is a good area where I'm buying land, predominantly buying houses around Mitcham, Ringwood, Vermont with 1,000 square metres plus, because I'm going to develop them into townhouses. This property here was a full renovation. It took 6 months. We just finished it this year. And then we gutted the property. I didn't do any work. I just had someone else do it for me. But I did drive to the property many times to check that they're doing the work. So really nice house on a big 1,330 square metre block, so 3rd acre. I bought the property I settled the property in March 2008 for $550. Stamp duty and legals were $35,185. The actual renovation cost me just under 160 grand. The holding cost for that period of time was $21,437.50. I just did my tax return, so I know exactly what these figures are. Total costs, including holding costs and everything, was $765,381.25. Valuation from Heron was $1,160,000, mainly because the block was a 4-unit site plus capital growth. So the equity position was $394,000. And I do a reno like this pretty much back to back every year. So I renovate and just buy and hold and teach people how to do it correctly. I've made plenty of mistakes. Painful, expensive mistakes. Who agrees you can learn from other people's mistakes, yeah? There's no point in you guys making mistakes, because I've been doing this now since I was 18, so I've been doing this for nearly 20 years. I can share all my mistakes with you. Don't do them because they're painful and expensive. So in terms of what we do is, these are some of the current properties that we have, these developments. We focus on townhouses, very close to the city, but sometimes we go way out if they're really cheap and cash flow positive. So this is a project we have in Bond Beach. These townhouses are $510,000. This is a pack of 5 across the road from the beach, literally. Everyone know Bond Beach, nice beaches, very clean, cool area, up and coming. This is development that we have in Cranbourne on the golf course. Very unique to have townhouses overlooking the golf course. And this is one of the top 50 golf courses in Australia. And these properties here are 340 grand and they're cash flow positive. So it's a very unique situation. Literally means that you've got money left over every week after you buy them. So for a lot of younger people trying to get into the market, buying a 3-bedroom townhouse for 340 grand, this cash flow positive is an easy way to enter into the market. Would I build my whole property portfolio out of these things? No. But is it a good way to get into the market as a stepping stone? Absolutely. This is another development that I've sourced literally on the park in the same area. And these townhouses are overlooking a reserve, walking distance to Lynbrook Station. They're also the same price, 340 grand and cash flow positive. I'll give you a snapshot of some of the apartments that I sourced. South Yarra, Good area. We target a lot. This project is called 62. 61 is gone. And these are basically apartments overlooking the city. And South Yarra are very, very well located. Probably the top walk score suburb, in Melbourne. No point looking for houses there because you're spending 1.8 to 3.5 million. So the only thing you can buy in South Yarra is apartments, low density. Don't go for high density, guys. Caulfield North, great area. This project is just completing now. And some of these are really, really cheap. There was one apartment there for 365. So once again, cash flow positive, easy to get into, especially for the younger people. Caulfield North, great area, great capital growth. Once again, it's there. And this is in Glen Iris, from 435,000. We just released this project to our members, and it's a brand new 3-year off-the-plan purchase. So you're getting 3 years of capital growth with no holding costs in one of the top areas in Melbourne. This is between Melbourne and Toorak, if you know Melbourne. So really good development. There it is there, close to the city. House and land estates. I've got access to 96 house and land estates all around Melbourne, from Metricon to all the builders. We do a turnkey product for our clients, so you get the keys given to you, you don't do anything, tenants just move in. At the moment with house and land, don't buy them. There's a massive glut of stock in Melbourne. So if you look at Hoppers Crossing, Tarnee, Truganina, there's 4,000 houses on the market at the moment. So without going into a lot of detail, don't buy house and land in Melbourne for the next 2 or 3 years. There is thousands of these houses that need to be absorbed back into the market. Stay away from the market, you're going to lose money. How much does it really cost to own an investment property in Melbourne today? Well, what we do with our members for the first one is we make it less than $50 a week. If you can afford less than $50 a week, all inclusive, you can get into property. Obviously, you have to qualify for the loan as well, okay? Because we're not going to give you the loan, but that's all it costs. And some of the properties are cash flow positive. So really, there's no better time to get in. I remember interest rates being 8, 9%. Then you're putting in $150, $200 a week, into a typical property. So 10 steps of securing a property in Australia. Just finishing off now. Number 1, you've got to go to a broker like W Financial to find out, how much can I borrow? Is that a good question to ask? Absolutely. If you can't borrow as much as you wanted to, what do I need to do in order to borrow more? That's a very high level discussion you can have with a qualified broker. Number 2, before you look at property, asset protection, guys. Make sure you speak to an accountant, lawyer, get everything done before you sign contracts. Then you work out the negative gearing. Well, there's nothing to work out anymore because it's all cash flow neutral and negative, slightly negative or positive, Sign the contracts. Make sure before you sign your contracts, you get an independent solicitor to vet your contracts. Don't sign anything until your solicitor checks everything. It's crazy if you sign anything without going to a solicitor. Then you wait for the land or build or whatever, and then you get the keys handed to you, and then you make sure that you get a good property manager. We actually use Cameron Fisher from Changing Places Real Estate, who's around the corner here in South Melbourne. He leases out all our properties. Amazing property manager. I use him myself. Landlord's insurance on the day the tenants move in, replaces any damaged property or anything. Do not ever settle a property, allow a tenant to move in without having insurance. Like getting a new car, driving out of the dealership, uninsured. Anything happens, you're exposed. And then there's a lot of waiting, sitting around managing a property portfolio. And one of the things that we do with our clients is ongoing coaching and mentoring, making sure you're staying on track and you're getting 5, 6, 10 over 10 properties. And then you sit back and you relax, because there is a lot of waiting involved in getting property. It's a lot of paperwork and months of doing nothing. That's why I love it so much, right?